Hello, and thank you for joining us for Soul Talks. A note on this episode, the topic we'll be discussing today is of sexual assault, and it may be disturbing or triggering for some viewers and listeners. If you or anyone that you know is dealing with the topic of sexual assault, please know that there is help out there. Online, you can visit rainn.org, that's RAINN.org, or you can call 800-656-HOPE. That's 800-656-4673. Thanks for joining us for today's episode, and welcome to Soul Talks. Welcome to Soul Talks with Prophet and Paul. I'm Paul Wozniak.
I'm Alison Prophet.
Hey, Alison. Great to be
Hi,
back
Paul.
here.
So excited, and I can't wait to dive into our conversation and share with our listeners the some of the changes and some of the ways that the soul has guided us into a slightly different direction. Do you want to share a little more about that?
I do. We sat down and we made big plans for the podcast. And, all great podcasts or works of art or anything like that has what we sort of call a positioning statement. Ours is how the soul leads the way through life, relationships, and business. And I have an extensive media background where I was on the radio for 20 years. And, as the world of the radio moved into the world of digital, this whole idea of podcasting came out. And the tried and true ways of radio are so ingrained in my mind that when we decided to do something recorded audio and recorded video, I was informed by everything that I learned in radio, and really, frankly, fine with the fact that that's not exactly the way that things are recorded or put out there just now. And Alison, I wanted to thank you for honoring my past and my desire to serve our audience in the way that I knew how, because I don't know that it was exactly resonating with you, all of the plans that I made for our podcast. But what I love about you is the fact that you went along with me and gave it a real try, which in a creative endeavor is, something that I think that two partners need to give to each other, is to give
Yeah.
them the respect of going, okay, maybe your idea will work. I'll truly get behind it and give it a try.
Yeah. Yeah, it was fun. I liked the idea of the segments and our soul secret of the week, and maybe we'll still record those and drip them out every other week like we were. I love that idea of like a little nugget. So, yeah, it was really fun to be in that exploratory space because my I feel like my magic has been just facilitating really great, engaging, organic conversations. And so it was fun for me to try on for size being a little bit more
Scripted.
formatted. And I
Yeah,
don't know. I mean, we
formatted.
weren't scripted.
Weren't
It just
scripted,
like we had
formatted.
like, yeah, more formatted. I'm a intuition is my plan kind of gal. I'm a let's let the magic unfold kind of person. So I'm always looking for ways to step into the places that I know are growth areas for me, and
Yeah.
having plans and structure and things like that is not necessarily my magic. And I want to say thank you to you. Like we're having a little love fest, everybody. But I just, thank you for being open to the conversations that felt like my intuition really was like, this is not really feeling authentic to me. And authenticity is, I mean, when we're living our life where our soul is lighting the way, that's authenticity at its core. And so I just really love that we were able to get together and have a conversation. And our egos, I think, both individually had moments of feeling a little bit of pressure or pain, but we both worked through it and we were open with each other. And my hope is that we are able to just model to people what it looks like to do good things with other people in the world, because we're not supposed to be walking this journey alone. And we've had many conversations, Paul, about the fact that we both feel resonance with each other and leaning into that and walking that journey a little bit, even when it doesn't make sense. I think we're a very odd pairing in some ways. And I also think it's perfect
Yeah.
in the same breath.
Yeah, there's a lot of memes out there that in a quick statement will bring a lot of wisdom. And, the whole idea of doing something that's uncomfortable brings you growth. But just because we do something that's uncomfortable doesn't mean that it's the right way. But,
Hmm.
we gave it a whirl, and I wasn't exactly comfortable. I didn't think that we were bringing out the best that we can have, because of all the times that we'll sit here, have conversations and go, we should be recording this. We
Right.
should,
Yeah.
we should be recording this. Push record. Can you
Right.
say that again? Can we do that again? And
Right.
so, so you brought forth the idea of our conversations being the podcast, and to let people behind the curtain, before we pushed record, we had those, should we be recording this
Right.
moment?
Yeah.
And we were talking about the topic of sexual assault.
Yeah. And I feel like it's really, really important that we pause right here and advise that we're going to be talking about some things that may trigger people.
Yeah,
And we'll obviously have a disclaimer in the beginning, but it's this conversation that we're getting into is so organic and it's real, and it's important, and we need to be talking about it, and we need to be shining light on it. And everything unfolds perfectly in this world if we're open to that truth. And so, Paul, I just want to say thank you for holding the space that you held before we pressed record, and honoring the fact that there is a big problem in this world, and wanting to be a part of the solution and shining light on the problem so that we can move into awareness and advocacy. And this is not a planned conversation by any means.
that's the truth. That's the truth. And I think that, what we're going to reveal and discover and talk about a bit in this podcast is the fact that, awareness is as good as we can do. But I do believe that the awareness of this forever standing problem is hopefully going to start making some changes in it in the near future. So, how do you want to begin this, Allison?
Yeah. So I was sexually assaulted at the end of February. And the reason we're talking about it today is because I filed a criminal charge. And based upon the way that that unfolded and the way that I handled myself and report, I basically was like a little bit put together. And I found out this morning that they're not moving forward. The DA has decided that there's not enough evidence to move forward with the criminal case, which essentially means the police did not have conversations with this person. And I feel like it's really important to shine light on this and have the conversation around, not to share all the gory details of what happened to me, but it was real. And I've alluded to this in some of I think our other conversations about, this is creating a shift in me and the things that I feel very passionate about, and how I want to support small business owners that experience something like this, because half of small business owners are women. And if you are a small business owner, you're likely doing something really magical in the world. And a sexual assault, is, it changes your life. And hearing today from the detective that they weren't moving forward with pursuing the criminal case, and the detective was awesome. But I can imagine for some people hearing that could throw them in a tailspin. And what I would love to kind of share through this conversation is, just because it doesn't go through the criminal process And just because maybe you didn't report it doesn't mean it didn't happen to you. It doesn't mean that it's your journey and how you handle this is unique to you. And this is a healing thing for me to be here talking about it and to be creating something beautiful from it. And I'm just honored to be free from the restriction of being able to talk about it, because I wasn't able to really talk about it because there was a potential for a criminal case. And so that creates different freedom in being able to express and share. And so in some ways, I actually feel like there's some freedom for me to now be able to go out there and advocate and shine light. And maybe this will be inspirational for somebody watching this to reclaim their power in some way and know that they're not alone and that we see you. And yeah.
So one of the things that came up with us before is the different view that we have on the subject of sexual assault, where when you're with women, your peers, it's hard for you to find someone who hasn't been either a victim of this or doesn't know a few people who has been a victim of it. And from my view, as a male, there's no conversation about us going, oh yeah, I took it too far.
Right.
You know, I can't think of ever a conversation where, you know, we go, oh yeah, I did that.
Yeah.
Or another person has said to me, oh yeah, I took it too far with this person. And so the conversation isn't happening amongst men, but it's happening with you and women friends and women peers and colleagues. Has it increased in the last couple of years, the awareness and the discussion of it, or has it been something that has been talked about for a long time?
That's really interesting. I think that it's been talked about for years, but I do feel like it was a little bit more behind the curtain. And you were sharing just some of the public figures that have, I think, been a part of the catalyst for this kind of stuff to be talked about more openly.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because I think the truth is that, and the detective actually even said this to me. He was like, the criminal defense system, and this has nothing to do with like politics or anything, but he's like, the criminal defense system leans more in the favor of the defendant versus the victim, which I prefer to use the word survivor,
Yeah.
as opposed to victim.
Agreed.
And I think that because the people that even work in the criminal justice system know that there are cards just stacked against them, right? Like the fact that this district attorney has had to review my case and listen to the 911 call and, and then kind of be like, yeah, like there's going to be holes here. And, like she didn't say no, but I was intoxicated. I was in shock. I was frozen. I was at a friend's house and it was her husband. And I thought I was in a safe place. And the truth is that's usually where it happens. And I don't have the statistics pulled up, but I've been doing a lot of research, and most sexual assaults happen by people that you know. It's not you're walking down an alleyway and you get accosted. It's in homes. It's in bedrooms.
Yeah.
And no wonder why it's not talked about, because there can be a lot of shame in it. And it's so disorienting. I mean, any kind of trauma, and I've done a lot of trauma research over my HR career, because my job was to support people in the workplace, and my ex-husband had PTSD. So I really just sought to understand it just so that I could understand how to support people. Trauma like rewires your brain. And you can undo that wiring and repattern it because our brains are these magical things. But when you're in that moment and you're in shock, you're not being very rational of like, okay, so if I want this to work out well for me in a court of law,
Right.
you
And
know, you're not thinking about it that way. And so when we see all of what happens out there in the world, right? You were asking the question, like, is it something that's more recently come out? I almost wonder, I mean, if we see these high power people also just getting away with stuff like so egregiously, walking away, how is one supposed to respond to this? Like, why some people might think like, why would I even bother going through the process of reporting it? What's the point? Um,
I I have a person who's close to me who has who's recently gone through this, and once again, we're going to provide resources in the show notes. And as we speak about this, there is no we're not speaking about any specific case or what anyone should have done or could have done or any of
right.
that kind of thing, because this is not something that, you know, you can categorize and put into a box. And it's also a trauma event and a very difficult event. So however it's been handled in the past, you know, that's how it was handled. I have a person who's close to me, and she's a part of an institution where a person within the institution of power, you know, came and basically overstepped the boundaries, and she was left with a decision of what to do. Do I report it? Do I ignore it? Was it wrong? Was it a happenstance kind of incident that he tried to play it off as? You know, it basically involved a dressing room where, you know, in like athletics or performance, where a lot of people have access to the rooms and it's commingled. And, you know, there was sort of a timing where a man walked in to potentially just get a glimpse of a woman who was, you know, in the midst of undressing in the scope of sort of athletics or performance. And she was like, that was timed. That was deliberate.
Mm-hmm.
And so she wasn't sure what to do, as I'm sure you weren't sure what to do. You know, they say recently through this experience, I've learned of the different responses that we can have to trauma, which I always thought was fight or flight, but it's fight, flight, or freeze. And I'm experiencing that right now in a different way with recovery from addiction. And the reality of being frozen is something that was so illuminating to me, because I was just like, wow, I'm not fighting or fleeing. I'm frozen.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was left with what to do, what not to do. Pursue it, you know, shine light on it, or don't. And this is going to be a tough decision for all people who go through this kind of trauma. But as the story goes, she did pursue it. She did report it. She sent it up the flagpole, and nothing happened to the actor that perpetrated this. Um, and she was disappointed. But then it was a little bit slow to happen. But the fact that she shined a light on this, a couple of months later, the whole department of this institution was having meetings about this as a problem. And in this specific instance, the fact that she did report it gave more momentum to that discussion, gave more credibility to that discussion. Whereas if she hadn't, the discussion would have maybe been had in a different way and with less impact. And the problem is not by any means solved or resolved. But I do believe the fact that she chose, in this instance, for her, the best thing to do was to bring it up. And she was so brave. She was so scared to bring it up. And when nothing punitive happened, she was so embarrassed and felt like, it was pointless. And I told her that I believed that she not only gave credence to anyone who might have to report it in the future as a leader, but also gave credence to the discussion that maybe made some little changes in the future. And so, can you recall or elaborate on your decision to take action or not take action, or what was going through your head, or anything that you can share about that?
Yeah. you know, um, in many ways, when the situation was unfolding, um, I was frozen, and there was a moment, and for me, the the incident occurred, and then it stopped, and then you know the friend that whose home I was staying at heard that I was upset and came in, was trying to comfort me, and then she got pulled out of the room that I was in by her husband. And in that moment, I was really scared. I was scared for myself and what might have happened after that. I was actually really scared for my friend. Um, and it was a Holy Spirit moment, really. And I remember hearing this voice that was like, Allison, you need to take a breath. And I took 3 breaths. And, you know, if you, if you ever spend any time in the Bible or anything, they talk about how like breath is God, right? And so I took 3 breaths. And in that moment, I was like, I need to take action. And I, I called 911. And I think that in and of itself is like, oh, that's a big deal. Like you feel so in danger that you're going to call 911.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I've had a number of people that have said that was really brave that you did that. And I mean, I didn't really consciously think about it. It was just like I didn't feel safe. And when, like you're sort of conditioned when you don't feel safe, like, you can call 911 and they literally answer 911, what's your emergency?
Yeah.
And in that moment, I was very much just like, I wanted to be out of there. I really didn't understand what was happening, but I just knew that my intuition was telling me, because intuition really is like, it's your gut, right? In some ways it can be like all of your senses are taking in information that you don't even know and see, and it's trying to guide you in a direction. And so your fight or flight response is in some ways that, and sometimes your fight or flight response can be something that takes over when it doesn't need to. But this was a time
Right.
where it needed to take over.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think like when you say like, what was it that caused you to take action? Like in my mind, that phone call, it was it wasn't even led by me. It was God's hand was like coming in and trying to keep me safe. Um, and the decision to actually then move forward to press charges, because when the police came, I just didn't want to be there. And I was in shock, and and I was intoxicated, but I just didn't want to be there. I wanted to be home. And for those of you that have watched our podcast or listened to our podcast from the beginning, this incident actually happened a few days before we recorded that first episode, that home episode. And so the power of that episode is even deeper because I remember being on the phone with the 911 person saying, I don't want to be here. I want to go home. I want to go home. I want to go home. And, the decision to move forward with pressing charges was, I know that everything happened was so out of character for me, right? Like, I'm not going to just call the police for no reason. I know what happened to me. My brain could make up so many different stories about, like, oh, maybe I said something or did something, or none of that happened. And so the whole theme of our show is conversations about how the soul lights the way in life, relationships, and business. My soul knew that what happened was not okay. And then I had to tune into my soul to decide, what did I want to do with this? And the truth was, I didn't necessarily want to be the one to have the conversation with my friend that this happened, because there was a totally different level of intoxication of that person. And in some ways I felt like, well, it'd be easier if the police had the conversation with her. Because I didn't press charges. I didn't actually talk to the police about it in the moment that they showed up, because I just wanted to be home.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be there anymore. I wanted to be not where I was.
Well, and that traumatic experience is still going on at that point.
Right, exactly. Yeah, like all of the hormonal responses, exactly. And so it did take me 2 days to kind of be like, holy what? Like, because the day after I was just in this recovery mode of trying to understand and ascertain what occurred. And it's so interesting because some of that is a part of why the case isn't moving forward. There's a lot of different pieces that were described to me, but you know, it's like, oh, but that's like science, like let me show you the science, district attorney, about what happens. And it's just so interesting. I mean, when I decided to move forward and file those charges, I knew that the likelihood of something happening was pretty slim, but it felt important to me. And I will say that even though the conversation that followed with the detective once I did file, which happened like 2 days later, his conversation with me was very affirming. It was validating, even though he recognized that he couldn't say that that person was guilty or not guilty, and he was just asking questions. I mean, that was my job in the HR world, right? It's like you sort of hold this neutral, unbiased, safe place where you are validating both sides and you are acknowledging both parties' experiences. And so just by having that conversation with the detective, now that I can look back on it, it was actually pretty healing and cathartic to share the story and have somebody to hold the space that can then explain what happens next, and that no matter what happens next, what happened to you is real. And I've never had an experience like this before, and it's come to my attention. Like, I felt woefully unaware of how rampant this is. I mean, after this occurred, I'm an open book and I'm a verbal processor. And, Paul, you were one of you were one of the first people to know too, because we were scheduled to record a podcast like less than 48 hours or 36 hours after this happened. And the number of people that have experienced this, and some people multiple times, we have to talk about this. We need to shine light on this. And everybody's experience and how they handle it is different. And it's perfect for you. But The healing process is not linear. And by talking about it and shining light on it, not saying that like this is what your whole life is, but I mean, when we're authentically ourselves, we integrate all parts of our story. We don't just take the ugly, yucky parts and just put them on a shelf. They become this part of what lights your soul up, right? And other people can be inspired by or educated by us sharing our experiences. And Paul, I love that. I love the story that you shared about your friend and what you shared with the fact that they took these actions and they had been disappointed by what happened, but there was a ripple down the road,
Big one.
a big ripple down the road.
A
And
big one.
I don't know what's going to happen as a result of the fact that my case didn't go through, but what it did was it opened the door for me to be like, all right, I'm sharing this now. I'm sharing this now, and there's some big things that are coming out of it, and there's some nonprofits that I'm working with and advocating with, and you all are going to get to be a part of that. And what a gift that is. That now I'm not bound to some, broken systemic system that keeps you from being able to talk openly about certain things because it might damage the criminal case. Well, you know what? F that. Like,
Yeah.
here we are now, and now I'm going to talk about this, and now it might create some other ripple effects. And it does now mean that there's a conversation for me to go and have with my friend, which breaks my heart, right? I mean, a 15-year friendship, that's a long time.
Yeah.
And so there's grief in that, right? It might look like I'm being brave and just out there talking and advocating. It doesn't mean that the pain's not there and the anger's, it's real. All of those emotions are real. And I love, we had an opportunity to share some, you know, scripture passages with each other and some, different things that really just speak to what we can do in these dark moments. And I think that's really what we want to inspire in our audience is you don't need to be drowned by your pain and the hard things that happen in your life. And the timing in which you move forward through them is going to be unique to you. I've been doing so much work and I have so many tools in my tool belt that the fact that this happened like less than a month and a half ago and we're here openly talking about it, like I know that's unique to me and my journey and my ways of moving forward. Find your way and be inspired and don't get dragged down. Don't let the thing hold power over you because they're probably not thinking about you the way that you're thinking about the situation, which makes sense. But leaning into the healing and finding community and trusting that your intuition and your soul can light the way and not letting that darkness overshadow the beautiful goodness that's like in you.
Over the past couple of years, there's been a lot more awareness raised of what the norms were, the unspoken rules of relations between men and women in the workplace and society and all over the place. And I just personally have always loved the hashtag Me Too. And I didn't have any experience with that on a personal level because I am a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male. So, I'm not in the demographic. But I wonder, when that was starting to happen, I mean, the whole idea of just, you looking left and looking right and go, oh, you too? Yeah, me too. Where inappropriate sexual advances or comments or assault or all of those things, it was like all of a sudden that discussion became allowed to be put at center stage. And What was that like?
As a woman who's never had the experience, but who has professionally had the opportunity to support people that have different kinds of traumas in their background, um, there was a part of me that still didn't feel like there was a lot of people in my own personal circle that came forward that I was aware of anyways, and shared that thing with me. Um, and it's interesting how now that I've had the experience, and I think there's a relatability that sometimes, like, if you're going to share something big like this, especially it's like, oh, but they didn't accept it as a criminal case because they didn't think that they could defend it enough. So, how could anybody understand it if they've never had the experience? Right? And you don't want to live it over and over again and have to explain to people, like, well, why did they decide that it's not a criminal case worth pursuing? Well, so you want me to explain all the things to you? I'll go into detail, right? It's like, but like, I think there is something that there's still shame. There's still shame. And so I actually didn't feel like I had a lot of people in my own life that were like, me too. Um, and so it still felt like I knew the problem, and there was awareness that it is a big problem. And again, I worked in the HR world, so like, I had to investigate sexual harassment claims. Luckily, I was never really in a work environment where there was a lot of that prevalent. But again, people don't speak up
Yeah.
because it's hard to prove, because usually it's happening between one person and another person. There's not a witness.
Right.
And so I think the Me Too movement is a great shift in the awareness, because awareness is everything, right? I mean, even just like what happened in, just with awareness around like racial injustices, right? I mean, sometimes bad things have to happen in order for us to shine light on the gravity of a problem. Um,
Yeah.
and it does cause you, the thing that, and in the show notes we're gonna share this, but the look at the statistics. Like, I didn't look at the statistics. Like, Me Too is great and all, but like, go look at the statistics. Go look at rain.org. It's incredibly disorienting. And then start having conversations with people in your life. And then reflect on, oh yeah, you probably have multiple people, and not just women, like there are also men impacted by sexual violence, in particular childhood sexual violence. That's something that I've been learning more about. I'm actually involved in a Northern Colorado organization called Core Defense, and I came across this organization before this situation actually even happened, in my life, literally like a month before. And the day of my assault, I actually had a meeting with the founder of this company. I was doing some professional development work with her, and as she was sharing more about what happens to childhood trauma survivors, I mean, think about, I'm a 41-year-old woman with lots of tools in my tool belt, and I still froze.
Of course.
And a child in their formative years, probably by the most trusted people in their life, the level of like impact that that will have on that human being for the rest of their life, the level of misunderstanding of like complex PTSD issues. Like, I want everybody to like leave this podcast and go research complex PTSD. I already understood it because of my HR work. Go read about the statistics about sexual violence and domestic violence. Educate yourself and then start having conversations with the people in your life and hold space and learn about how you can have those conversations. And we'll put some resources in there, but every 68 seconds, an American is sexually assaulted. And that's only the ones we know about.
And that's mind blowing.
One out of every six American, I pulled up the statistics, one out of every six American women has been the victim of an attempted or completed rape in her lifetime.
That's reported.
That's reported, right? This is all what we know. And the fact of the matter is that this trauma in general is challenging, but this is it's such an intimate trauma. And we are human beings that, like, literally our bodies are designed to desire touch, right? What's the first thing they do when you're born? They lay you on your mother's chest. And so when you have something that, like, disrupts your kind of safety of being touched, man, we all need to walk around with more compassion for what other people are dealing with, because we don't know who's dealing with these things. And so if you're having an argument with your coworker, or like even Paul, like when we were kind of unpacking this podcast stuff, I was like, my trauma stuff is showing up and I don't really understand it. And I'm going to try to articulate it, but not everybody has those skills in their toolbox. And my hope is that just through some of the conversations that we have on Soul Talks is that we're inspiring other people to learn how they can move forward, learn how they can articulate things, have other guests that have some different experiences where they've allowed their soul to light the way through challenging and good times in life, relationships, and business. It's not easy to talk about heavy things, but I think our goal, and I love that you were so open when we were having this great conversation and I was like, we should record this. And you were like, okay, are you sure? Right? Like, you were so loving in how you created a sense of safety. And yes, I am sure I'm not being coerced. This is, I am here by choice because I want to light the way that if this hasn't happened to you, it's probably happened to somebody, multiple people that you know. And reading over the statistics and digging into this information might be disorienting, because you might actually discover that you've actually had these experiences in your life, but you didn't know how to articulate it, because it's complicated.
Yeah. The next things that I want to explore and bring up, I really want to make sure that I express that this is, I'm going to speak from my belief perspective, because there is no way to categorize this or to fit it into a box. But and this has to do a little bit with, like, our boundaries, and also with the idea that we may be moving into a period where men are faced with the idea that there will be consequences because of actions like this. Whereas, maybe as early as 5-6 years ago, the idea that a man could try to perpetrate something like this and wouldn't have many consequences because the discussion was not above board or being had, and now it's being had a little bit more, can make a difference. So the idea, and I'm not sure how these men's mind operates, because mine doesn't operate this way, but I think that, there's the possibility that if a man is going to try to perpetrate something evil like this, they may consider whether or not there will be consequences. And if there will be none, they're more likely to to perpetrate a bad act. But if there will be some, then maybe they're a little bit less likely to perpetrate this bad act. And when I spoke about my friend who reported this, um, there was nothing official. There was no official reprimand or punishment to this man, but he was faced with the idea that she said to him, "You can't do this to me and get away with it. I'm not just going to not say anything about it." And then I know that this person's wife had to hear about it. I know that it went through the professional circles because it was an official investigation. So they knew about it. And that was her saying to him, "You can't do this to me." And her peers heard about it and said, "Well, this happened to her, and she said something about it. So A, look out for that guy. And B, if something like this happens," she was a brave example of, coming forward. And when there were no repercussions officially, she was disappointed. But that ripple effect, I think, was huge. I think it opened up the conversation. It had an impact on further things in, that unfolded a little bit later. And also, regardless of what is or isn't happening with your case, flashing lights outside a person's home is a consequence. And it is you saying, "No, you can't do this to me." And we're always faced with, I mean, let's bring up that stupid example from pop culture of Will Smith and Chris Rock. Will Smith, whatever decision he made, he had to make a decision of whether or not he was going to accept what happened there. And he probably didn't handle it the right way, but it's kind of like our boundaries. When do we decide to say, "Nope, you can't do this to me. You don't do this to me"? In the case that I'm speaking of, I believe that it had an enormous impact. And even if it's just a micro impact of that man knowing, well, if I do this, they might push back. And then all of a sudden, all of these things happen, even if they're not official. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I that's the hope, right? um in There were so many reasons why I decided to press charges, and some of it was related to my friend and my interpretations of the relationship, and and being a woman who came out of a marriage that did have emotional abuse within it, and learning and understanding what that looks like because I experienced it, and being able to be like, oh, maybe this is a catalyst for her to open her eyes. Um, I think, yeah, it's like you said, like lights outside of a person's home, you would hope would be some sort of changing event for that person. Um, but you can't hold on to that either, right? I mean, I can't define like my success or failure in this situation by like what happens with that person. Um, I mean, I
Right,
certainly,
because there is no success or failure for you in the situation.
right, exactly. And it's just what you do with it, right? I mean, and that's the message out there is there's a lot that's outside of your control in a situation like this, but what can you do to move forward in a place of joy and love and grace and acceptance? And I, the amount of love that's out there in the world, um, and the amount of just it's overwhelming actually. Like when you go through something big and you don't try to do it by yourself, man, it's inspiring. Like the number of people that have just literally and figuratively like wrapped their arms around me in this. Like if nothing else, if it can be a reminder for the beauty of humanity, and not let the dark part of it overshadow the fact that there's more light in this world than there is darkness. I'm not sure that I'm answering your question, but I mean, I can only hope that this, creates some kind of ripple for that particular person. But even if it doesn't matter because it impacted my life, and I feel like I'm called to do something beautiful with it. And it's revealed some really beautiful things about humanity. Even the detective, right? I mean, I'm not angry with him. In fact, he was quite loving and supportive, and there's some hope there, there's some hope that there's good people that are out there trying to do their best. And even after my conversation, we talked through a couple of things, and I was like, well, what about this? And what about this? And he was willing to take those things and go back to the DA and there is a lot of darkness in the world. So for me, it's recognizing there's some other bigger, darker things that they're dealing with in an understaffed, broken system. So yeah, finding the light and holding on to hope and knowing that you're loved and loving on everybody that's around you and forgiving. I mean, what good would it do for me to walk around with hate in my heart for this person when they're a hurt person, right? I mean, hurt people hurt people. And that doesn't make it right, but this isn't about right or wrong. This is about what do we do with the painful parts of our human experience.
Well, I just, I was so proud of you and inspired by you. And I believe that whenever you told me what happened and how you were handling it, I was so impressed. And I was just, I didn't have any doubt that, you know, that, that you would, that how strong you were. And I have to believe that it did something good.
Me too.
I have to believe that it did something good.
Me too.
For anybody who's listening or watching, if you have been through an experience like this, we'll provide some resources in the show notes. And if you're watching it on video, we'll probably flash it on the screen. If neither Alison nor I are professionals in this realm. So, but if you needed somebody to talk to, I'm here. And
Yeah, I'm here too, and just pulled up the phone number for the RAIN organization, which provides a lot of support and resources for sexual violence survivors. Their phone number is 800-656-HOPE, 800-656-4673. And yeah, I know this was a heavy episode, but we have to talk about the dark things to bring light to them. And so, Paul, thank you so much for holding space. And we promise not all of our conversations will be heavy, because I know last episode was also about mental health. but we're just following our intuition in piecing this, this beautiful work of art that is Soul Talks with Prophet and Paul. And we're just so honored to be able to be the conduit to bring these conversations out to the world so that we can continue to do good things with hard things.
All I wanted to do when we decided to do a podcast is provide some value to the people listening to it. That's all I wanted. That's my goal. It's what I believe a person with a platform should do. And thanks for being so open and willing to be a voice. I appreciate it, and I love you so much, Alison. You're such a wonderful human, and you're a big part of my recovery from other issues that I'm having. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate you.
Thanks, Paul. I love you too. I appreciate your friendship and your partnership.
Please feel free to reach out to us. We're easy to find. Yeah. And follow, and share this episode, or any part of this. We really appreciate you, and thanks for being with us for Soul Talks with Prophet and Paul. I'm Paul Wozniak, and she's Alison Prophet. Thanks, Alison.
Thanks, Paul.